Hi, I am RAUL ROA ESTILISTA.
Today we are going to see a short layered haircut with posterior projection. This technique allows me to make an elegant and modern cut. And this will be the sectioning on both sides. So we are also going to do it in the back and top. We start by defining the length of the outer perimeter. In the triangular part, or section, of the back of the head, we start with a straight line in the central part. And when we move to the sides, we are going to create the stroke with a diagonal inclination, so that I have more length on the sides. We take strands from each side and bring them to the center. And they must be the same length with reference to the point of the triangle. Not only at the ends, but in the middle part. So we are going to make sure that all the outer perimeter is completely symmetrical. After having reached the length of the outer perimeter, let's take our first guide wick, which will be in the central part of the triangle. We are going to project it at 90 degrees, with an inclination of 45 degrees as shown in the image and in the video, and we cut. Now we select another wick to cut, that we are going to take to the same cutting point of our guide wick, maintaining the same inclination, and we cut. That's why each wick must be thin, so you can see where the cutting line goes. We continue sectioning wicks to be cut in the same way, and they will converge there in the center, always keeping the inclination of 45 degrees. It is very important to always maintain the cutting position. I can move my body when I am going to section the fuse to be cut, but I must recover my cutting position again. Now, we continue with the opposite side. I recover my central guiding wick, and I continue sectioning wicks parallel to my guide wick. And I'm going to take these wicks to the center. This will allow me to make the hair shorter in the center. And on the sides they turn out a little longer. Here, it is important to check. And they must remain of the same length. We will also make a correction of the diagonal angle that will remain on each of the sides, because these are going to serve as a guide wick. To continue with the rest of the cut, after checking and rectifying the cutting line, let's continue with the other section, taking wicks parallel to the vertex of the triangle of the section we cut immediately before. We project it and look for the cutting angle that has resulted from cutting in that section. I keep selecting wicks that I will take to the same point of cut. Remember that the wick must be sectioned very thin to be able to see and appreciate the guide wick very well, and not start inventing lines that do not exist. This type of cut is very elaborate, because the sections should be thin as I recommend. There are people who tell me that they take much thicker sections. Yes, it is an option, but there will be a jump between one wick and another. Because the idea of sectioning very thin wicks is that there will be a projection from short to long. What will be seen in the result? We achieve that when we take thin sections. So, if you are looking for a more industrial style of education, which are cuts of 15 minutes, I recommend that you study at the Linguiers Academy. What is a fast-working hair salon style? The style that I like and that he tried to use are Tony and Guy and Vidal Sassoon, which are much more careful cuts that are tighter. Well, that's what I do. As you can see, it is also a mobile guide wick. It is not stable, we are moving it as we cut, to create more gradation or more layers. Because, if we leave it at the same point, it is going to create a solid line for me, and obviously, we would be making another type of cut. Here, what we are doing is that I am transporting the guide wick, I am moving it to be able to cut the wick that I am transporting to the cutting point. Continued sectioning wicks to cut. And I'm going to take them to the same cutting point. Remember that the guide wick is mobile and not stable. We start by selecting parallel wicks to the perimeter of the triangle that is diagonal. But, as we are gradually sectioning wicks, we will reach one of the sides. Wick selection becomes a bit more vertical. We keep working the same way. The last wick to cut will end up parallel to the vertex of the section, as shown in the figure. When you finish cutting the section, it is very important to remember how was it that we did the elevation of the wicks and how we projected them. Do exactly the same, but opposite in the other section. We will also section a wick to cut parallel to the vertex of the triangle. We are going to take the wick to cut at our cutting point. The inclination will give it to us the same cutting line resulting from the lower zone. We also section very thin wicks, so we can see where our cutting line is. At least, at the beginning, it is very important that the wicks that are sectioned are very thin. Already when there is a much more marked cutting line, we can take a slightly thicker section if you wish. It is good to try different thicknesses so you can verify what I'm telling you. It is also very helpful in maintaining my body posture. When I am cutting the left side, I must be standing slightly to the right side. And when I'm cutting the right side, I must be standing slightly on the left side. This will allow me a balance in the haircut, and that the sections remain the same length. I must also keep a tilt of the fingers and the angle that will give me the same cut line that I have been bringing from the beginning of the cut of this section. As I was talking to you, there are also two types of hairdressers. The industrial hairdresser, that we call that, who handle a high volume of clients in the salon, and that obviously work low prices. And it needs to be very fast. The estimated time of a cut ranges from 10 to 15 minutes. I was talking about the Longris school, that they handle against twists, pigtails, to obviously speed up the process. The cuts are slightly good, acceptable. But it is another type of hairdresser. And there is the other type of hairdresser, that is the personalized service. That it takes more time to make a haircut and is more expensive. Because obviously, it is a cut that takes more time to make and finish the cut, so that it fits tight, that it looks very nice and has a lot of movement. It's not that the other cuts don't move, they look pretty too. But then they are two types of hairdressers. It's like comparing haute couture with pret-a-porter clothes. They work very well. Haute couture clothing fits the body with better quality fabrics. Something similar happens with the type of custom hairdresser. Then in this type of personalized hair salon, there is the school of Tony and Guy and Vidal Sassoon. That are the ones that I know, and that I also intend to emulate. Well, we continue selecting parallel wicks diagonally. And when we get closer to the side, we already began to select the wicks a little more vertically. This is also more for comfort when cutting. And it also affects the cutting result. Because what we are looking for is a natural hair loss. And that will allow the hair to fit better to the skull. Let us remember that the guide wick is mobile, and that we must move it as I cut the wick. We continue like this until the end of the whole section. When finished, we will carry out the verification, carrying equidistant strands to the center to check that I have the same length. If not, I have to go back to correct where it is longer. Now, we will continue with the sides. We are going to section wicks vertically, which we are going to project towards the back. And, as a guide, we will continue to use the length resulting from the cut of the immediately preceding section. Here, we are going to create a stable guide wick. That is, each of the wicks that we are going to section vertically. We are going to project it, and we are going to take it to the same cutting point. This what is called a stable guide wick. At the beginning of the cut, we talked about it being a layered cut with posterior projection. Whenever we take the hair to be cut at the back, or we project it to cut to the back, it will be shorter in the back and longer at the front. Now, we are going to work with the opposite side, also sectioning the wicks to be cut vertically. And we are also going to project them to the back. And we are going to use the guide wick, the length resulting from the previous section. Our hand position, as we can see, changes, and this is to compensate the movement that we make. If I were ambidextrous, which is the one who uses both hands to cut, the left and the right, obviously it would be very easy. But, since I am right-handed, I have to work comfortably to be able to maintain the cutting angle. And, on the left side, as we can see, we are cutting on the inside of the hand. This allows me to keep a very similar cutting angle on each of the sides. We will also carry out the corresponding verification of the lengths. Okay, now, let's continue with the top. We start on the opposite side from where she combs her hair. We will select a wick parallel to the sectioning of the upper part. To cut our first guide wick, let's take a wick from the back, which we are going to use as a guide, and cut in an inclined way from minor to major. That is, it will be shorter in the crown area and longer in the front part. This guide wick is also going to be stable. That is, each of the wicks that we are going to section, they are going to converge to the same point of cut, and the same inclination is going to be maintained. What is this going to allow? Make it shorter where the haircut began, where my guide wick was sectioned, and longer the last wick that I am going to cut. Because it will take much more distance in its trajectory, it will take a greater projection to cut. It will also be longer. It is also very important I move my cutting position to section the wick. But, once you have sectioned the wick to cut, I will resume the cutting position. And I'm going to cut that wick that I just sectioned. The number of wicks to be cut will obviously vary, depending on the amount of hair our client has. And obviously, the thinner the sections, the hair will have a better behavior. From short to long, fully embracing the face, and adjusting in a very natural and very nice way to the skull. As you can see, I can move to section the wick. I can move to bring water to moisten the hair. But I must always remember my cutting position. Where am I stopping to cut? It is very important that we do not lose that. Because, obviously, this affects the achievement and the result of this section. We could also call this cut a long pixie. Because, let's remember that the pixie cut, it is characterized by having the front part much longer than the sides and the back part. We could say that this cut fits in the pixie cuts, which are characterized by being very short on the sides and on the back. But here, we keep the same principle. But obviously, the sides and section back, the hair is longer than a classic pixie cut. But we could say that it is a long pixie cut. We continue sectioning all the wicks to be cut in the same way. And we are going to take them to the same cutting point until the end of the whole section. As I told you about all the hair in this section, it is taken to cut to the opposite side where she combs her hair. Now, we are going to see how to comb it to the side where she combs her hair. It will be short to long. And it will fit very well to the face and skull. Now, with smooth scissors, or with a sweet edge, or with a razor edge, I proceed to polish the contour, where I'm going to slide the scissors very gently, saving the length that we have left from short to long. We brush and iron if we need it, in order to have a real texture. And what we are going to work on now is the filtering technique. To get a better texture, we will reduce the volume of the hair without removing the length. For this, what we use is smooth scissors, or sweet-edged, or razor-edged scissors, where she will enter parallel to the hairline to create small spaces and thus achieve a very natural movement and a very modern finish. I explain this technique well in one of the videos I have on the YouTube channel, How to Remove Volume and Give Hair Texture.